Hello again and welcome to another Warhammer 40k Imperial Guard Tactics video, and today guys we will be continuing with our Militarum Tempestus Scion series with a look at the Scion Jackals. Now before we go any further, I would like to say a huge thank you to Branson Sarlinger for sending in some awesome pictures for me to use as part of this video. I really like these classic Kazakin models, and the paint scheme that you've done on these Branson is absolutely fantastic, really captures that old school Kazakin theme. If anyone else has got any cool pictures that they want me to use in my videos, please post them on my Facebook page. There will be a link down in the description below. Now, as always guys, this is going to be a deep dive, fine detail review of the Militarum Tempestus regiment trait that we're looking at today. I will be covering everything from the Regimental Doctrine, the Warlord trait, Relic, Stratagem, and then on top of that, we'll be taking a look at the best way to use this particular Scion regiment. Do the Jackals work best as an independent fighting force, or are they better used as a support army as part of maybe a wider Imperial Soup force? So without further ado, let's take a look at today's regiment in greater detail. Now first things first, let's take a look at the Regimental Doctrine. And the Scion Jackals have something called Death from the Dark. And it's actually quite a simple regimental doctrine, but quite powerful. Each model that you kill from an enemy unit counts as 2 for when that unit has to take a battle shock test in the morale phase. So for example, if you were shooting at a squad of 5 Space Marines and you killed 4 of them, when it came to them taking that leadership check, it would have counted as them taking 8 casualties. So you can see that's actually going to have quite a big effect on a lot of armies' morale, because they're going to be potentially losing lots of additional men who are running away in the battle shock phase, in the morale phase. Using those Marines, for example, even though you only kill 4 Marines out of potentially a 5 to 10 man squad, when it comes to them taking battle shock, Marines are leadership 8, which means they're already, whatever the opponent rolls on that dice is the number of Marines that are going to run away. So even with And They Shall Know No Fear, which allows them to re-roll it, they're still losing at least 1 extra casualty, and you've done nothing for that. You've just killed what you would normally kill. So it has great potential. Now there are actually there are actually 2 ways of looking at this. It's really good for finishing off elite units. So let's say you kill 4 Primaris out of a squad. That squad is now guaranteed, out of a 5-man squad, typical 5-man intercessor squad. That unit is now guaranteed to run away and lose the last man, because they're only leadership 8, unless they are Ultramarines and then they get the +1 save, or they're near a chaplain. But if they're just on their own, Ultramarines aren't a particularly common chapter to face in competitive environment. And chaplains are fairly common, to be honest, but normally you see people running one of them and it's as a smash chaplain, so he's going off doing bad damage. So you don't often see chaplains used as a way of boosting morale. So when you take that into account, unless the opponent is willing to spend 2 command points to auto pass that unit, that is an enemy squad wiped out, and it's a free extra casualty that you've caused to that squad of Primaris. That's 2 extra wounds you've done to them, without even having to finish that squad off, with normal conventional weapons. So that's a really good way of looking at it. You only have to, it's a really good way of finishing off elite squads that would normally find themselves immune to morale, or at the very least very resistant to it. Or it absolutely rinses horde armies. So for example, if you were shooting this at a big squad of boys, Orc boys, and you were able to kill 15 Orc boys, a respectable amount. Now normally those boys wouldn't really care, because they would have they could use mob rule and get leadership 30 from another squad. So if there's another big squad of boys next to them, so normally they wouldn't care. But if you kill 15 Orc boys, it counts as killing 30 Orc boys, which means that they're going to start taking extra casualties again. It's a great way of finishing off, let's say, a 20-man boy unit. They're really going to start taking extra casualties. Or just making those Orc boys who are normally immune to morale, they're actually going to die. They're actually going to start running away. So it is a really nice, tasty little regiment trait. However, it does have some disadvantages. Firstly, there are plenty of ways out there for armies to ignore morale. For example, you can spend 2 command points for a stratagem from the big rulebook, Insane Heroism, and you automatically pass that leadership check. You have things like the Chaos Space Marine Warlord trait, which is the Iron Warriors one, which allows all units within 6 inches to automatically pass leadership. That's not unique to Iron Warriors. There are plenty of armies out there which have a similar regiment trait. You have things like Genestealer Cult and the Patriarch. Everyone's fearless when they're near the Patriarch. So the problem with the regiment trait is that when it is available, it's very powerful. But when you come across one of those relatively common ways for armies to become immune to battle shock, it's not a big deal. It completely neuters you. So it's good, but it's situational. The second problem you might have is if you're facing against a heavily mechanized or armored army. It's all well and good making the enemy's infantry run away, but what if they're all mech'd up? What if you're facing Elder in Wave Serpents? What if you're facing other Imperial Guard armies in Chimeras? Pretty common. The current sort of meta-breaking list that's doing the rounds at the moment is Primaris Intercessors in Impulsors. What are you going to do about those Impulsors? They've all got a 4-up invulnerable save, those floaty rhino boxy boys. So it is a good trait when it works, but the problem is that there are times when it's just not going to be in effect, and there's going to be times when your enemy can just counter it with a stratagem, and there's going to be times when you're facing an army which is heavily resistant to it, like a mechanized force. So it's a bit of a tricky one. I'm not saying it's a bad regimental doctrine, but whilst it is simple to understand, it can be quite difficult to get it to come off, to implement it. So we'll now move on to the relic, and I actually quite like this one, and it's called Hound's Teeth. It's a relic chainsword which gives you +1 strength, -2 AP, it's damage 2, and it gives you +3 attacks. And as a Brucey bonus on top of that, when fighting Eldar, reroll wound rolls with this weapon. Now, first thing, the reason I like it is it's free. It replaces a chainsword. Chainsword have no cost. Second thing that I like about it, it's quite beastie. You know, +1 strength, not to be underestimated. That suddenly means that your Tempestus Prime who's wielding this is wounding enemies, typical enemies like Primaris on a 4, or wounding toughness 3 enemies on a 3. It puts you into that delicious strength 4 bracket, which is a very nice bracket to be in. The -2 AP is perfect because when you're in combat, either you're going to be facing a cheap chaff unit which isn't going to have a good save, so the -2 AP will typically cut that down to either no save or a 6-up save, or you're facing a relatively elite combat unit which is going to have some sort of invulnerable save, so you might be taking it from a 3-up to a typical 5-up invulnerable save or 4-up invulnerable save. So it's nice, it has just the right amount of AP to be effective. And 2 damage, well, can't complain about 2 damage, perfect Primaris killer. And if you come across a chaff unit which has a feel no pain, you're more likely to get those feel no pains to fail. Last but not least, +3 attacks, you can't ever complain about that. And you can really start getting a bit crazy with this weapon, because you could take a Tempestus Prime with the Hound's Teeth, so he's got 3 attacks base, +3 attacks from the Hound's Teeth, then you put him near a Priest, and he's got 7 attacks. 7 attacks from a 35-point model, at strength 4, AP -2, 2 damage, not to be underestimated. Now, a lot of people will go, bit weird having the reroll wound against Eldar. Well, to be honest, treat it as a bonus, because even without those abilities, this weapon is fantastic. But secondly, Eldar are one of the most common competitive armies you're going to come across in a tournament. And in general, they're one of the more popular Xenos armies in 40k. So it's actually quite a nice bonus to have. If you go to a tournament and you've got a Tempestus Prime with this weapon, and with you playing Scions, you want to squeeze everything you can out of your army, so there will be times you want to get into close combat. You're no worse in combat than Eldar, you might as well beat them up. In fact, against a lot of Eldar units, you have a better save than them in close combat. You know, a lot of Eldar use 5+ armor, although to be fair, they have 4+. But you're no worse than them in combat. And you know, having this Tempestus Prime, sending him in against a unit of Dire Avengers, pretty good baseline Eldar unit that you're going to come across. And yeah, you're going to do some significant damage to them. So, and if you don't kill yourself out of combat and the fighting goes on, and maybe with a squad of guys you're able to wrap and trap, guess what? You can then tell this guy in the following phase to fix bayonets, and he can cut himself out of combat that way. So it's a decent little relic, not to be underestimated, one of the better damage output relics. However, having said that, it is a damage output relic. So what does that mean? Well, it's not a buffing relic. So with Scions, with Guard, the relics you really want to be going after are the ones that buff units around you, not that increase the damage of one particular guy. Also, it's a close combat one. So you don't really want to be seeking close combat. I mean, you can do it in a pinch, and this relic does make him pretty good in close combat. But if you had to pick between this and a relic plasma pistol, the relic plasma pistol is a range weapon. You can use it for the turn you deep strike in. You can blast off some extra shots. This relies upon you being able to get into combat, which is something that you're not likely to find yourself doing as a Scion. I mean, it will come up now and then, and this does give you some ability to do it, but it's not something you want to be seeking out. I mean, compare this to the Lambden Lion relic with a 5 invuln for everyone around you. Yeah, that's a big old buff relic, and this one is not a big old buff relic. The next thing we're going to take a look at is the Warlord trait, Skilled Tracker. This is quite a simple one again. Redeploy 3 Scion Jackal units before the game begins. So how this works is both sides fully deploy, and then before anyone does the first movement phase, either if you've got first turn yourself or if your opponent has, before your opponent moves any models, you go, hang on, I'm going to redeploy 3 of my units. Now, couple of key things here. One, it's any units, not infantry units, any units. Secondly, there is no limit on the amount you're allowed to redeploy them. You have to stay in your deployment zone, but unlike other redeploy traits, which say you've got to do it within 12 inches of the Warlord, or you've got to do it within 12 inches of your starting point, or you've got to redeploy within 6 inches of the model, nothing like that. You can redeploy anywhere in your deployment zone. That's really good, because either it allows you to hide units from an opponent. So let's say you're going first, and your opponent, and you've deployed in a way that leaves you quite exposed, and then the opponent seizes on you, you go, whoa, hang on, I need to redeploy my guys to try and counter that siege. Or you can do it where you lure your opponent into a trap, and you go, oh yeah, I've deployed equally on both halves of my deployment zone. Actually, psych, I've not, and I'm going to redeploy the units I had on the left-hand side onto the right-hand side. I'm going to totally overwhelm one flank. It's actually really good. It has a lot of tactical capabilities. A lot of people overlook this kind of Warlord trait and ability, myself included, and we shouldn't, because it does actually, when you come across it, it does really mess with your plans when you're facing against it. A really good example of this is Genestealer Cult. How many times have we all faced Genestealer Cult and found it incredibly frustrating because you've deployed everything, you think you've got a really good angle, you can see the blips to the side, and then suddenly your opponent starts pulling blips off the table, they're going to deep strike, moving them around, and suddenly they've given you first turn, you can't see anything, and all the units are hidden away, and you essentially waste one of your turns. Genestealer Cult do it on a bigger scale, but Jackals can still pull it off, and it does give them quite a bit of can give you quite a tactical edge over your opponent. So I like it. As a Warlord trait, I like it. Elusive Hunters is the unique stratagem of the Jackals, and again, it's just a good one. So 1 CP, you select a Scion Jackal unit when it's targeted in the shooting phase, and then all ranged weapons, not just from that unit but for the rest of the phase, when shooting at that selected Scion Jackal unit, are -1 to hit as long as they're over half range. Now this is good, but it's not great. The issue being is it says over half range, which is okay when someone's shooting you with like a bolter, 12-inch range, over that, -1 to hit, that's okay. What if someone's shooting you with like a battle cannon? 72-inch range, minimum half range on that thing's 36 inches. Scions like to be up close and in the enemy's face, doing lots of shooting. So against enemy heavy weapons, this isn't really going to help you. So it is good, but I wish they just said when it's over 12 inches. If you're over 12 inches away, you -1 to hit. That would have been great. That's what they have with everyone else. That's what they have on regiment traits, chaos traits, everything else. But no, it's over half range. So that's unfortunate. The upside to this is that it is any unit. It's not just an infantry unit. So again, you don't have to put this on your infantry boys. You can put it on a Torx Prime. That's good. You may have a Torx Prime with missile launcher and autocannons blasting away, giving you good fire support. Put a -1 to hit on it. You know, it might be where it's getting to the closing stages of the game. You've had a Torx Prime sitting at the backfield providing some fire support, but more importantly, sitting on an objective. And your opponent's like, well, I want to deny you that objective at the end of the game. I'm going to blow you off it. And you go, well, actually, 1 CP, Elusive Hunter, that Torx is now -1 to hit. That's a big deal. That does make it harder for your opponent to shift you off objectives. I do think it's a good one. I just think again, it's a bit of a tricky one because your opponent can just move into half range, and with a lot of heavy weapons, like I said, it's not going to come into play. It's not a bad stratagem though. So overall, let's take a look at these traits and doctrines and relics and stuff, and see, you know, how they stack up. So Death from the Dark, good, but can be situational. Relic, the Hound's Teeth, a good combat relic, but combat's not necessarily where you want to be as a Scion. Skill Tracker, redeploy 3 units, that's solid. Elusive Hunters, good for 1 CP, but half range means that heavy weapons are still going to be able to hurt you and shouldn't be a problem. And won't have a problem against you. So overall, I'd say this is an okay regiment trait, but it's not a standalone one. It's an okay regiment, but it's not got great buffing potential. You know, your relics aren't buffing. Your stratagem can put a buff on one of your units, but it's situational. Yeah, and your warlord trait is a one-off, and sometimes you might not want to redeploy things. Maybe you're exactly where you need to be. So overall, I would say this is not a good standalone regiment. However, I do think as a support regiment, it has got some merit. You see, you could run a nice sound detachment as part of your regular guard army, and in that regular guard army you've got all the artillery and tank commanders, the ability to do death from afar, and more importantly to crack open enemy transports. And so how I see the Scion Jackals working is alongside a detachment of fire support. So let's say you've got your 3 tank commanders, and turn 1 they blow open a couple of transports, and then turn 2 your Scion Jackals come down and they just shred and death from the dark the contents of those transports. I think that's a really good way of using them. If I was to take this regiment trait, it would as a shredding regiment trait, I would probably focus on plasma drop squads. you want to take multiple 5-man Scion squads, probably 3 to 4 of them in a battalion, and you want to be able to drop them down with a plasma pistol and 2 plasma guns in each squad, and you want to just be doing the maximum amount of damage as you can do. Overcharge, just do as much damage as you can, and cause as much battle shock as possible. You want to be looking at going, right, this squad is going to shoot that 5-man squad, I'm going to kill 3. That's fine. There's a good chance the enemy will fail that battle shock test. The next squad's going to do the same thing. The next squad's going to do the same thing. You never want to finish enemy units off. You want to be causing as many additional morale casualties, because this doctrine allows you to not have to worry about overkill. You know, what if, you know, there's one enemy guy left in that 5-man Primera squad. Oh, he's going to survive. I need to put another squad in there to finish him off. No, you don't. He's probably going to run away. In fact, he's definitely going to run away unless the enemy 2 CPs him. So that's how you want to be using it. In that case, I would not bother with the Relic, the Hound's Teeth, and I would not bother with taking the Warlord trait Skill Tracker, because you don't want to give up your Warlord trait, and B, you don't want to bother spending a CP on Progeny of Conflict to get an extra one. I don't see in a support detachment the Relic or the Warlord trait being worth spending CP on, or giving up your free Relic or your free Warlord trait. The Stratagem Elusive Hunters, I imagine, could actually be quite useful, because you could drop these guys down on a flank, they annihilate their drop zone, and then when the enemy tries to clear them away, you can go, right, 1 CP on one of those squads. Now, I would consider taking if you're building this Scion Jackal support battalion, I would consider taking 2 5-man squads, and then then considering 1 10-man squad with 4 plasma guns and a plasma pistol in there, because that means when you put elusive hunters on your big 10-man squad, you're getting greater efficiency from it. You could easily, you don't worry about the enemy shooting the 5-man squads, but that big 10-man squad's a juicy target for the opponent. He's likely to go for it, so you put the 1 CP on and he wastes some shooting. Because what you have to consider, guys, is Scion unit with in cover, with take cover on them, with elusive hunters. That's a really difficult unit to shift. That's a 2+ save, -1 to hit unit. Now, there is another way of looking at this. There is actually another way of looking at this, which is you could do the deep strike support unit detachment, or you could do the long range fire support holding backfield objective support detachment. Okay, so instead of running everyone with drop plasma, instead you take some Scion Jackal, some bigger Scion Jackal units, with a couple of, maybe you take multiple 5-man squads with 2 hotshot volley guns in, or you take a couple of bigger squads with 4 hotshot volley guns in, and they sit at the back, and the rest of your army is dedicated to rushing forward and being aggressive and doing the damage. And your Scion guys, they sit back in cover, home field objectives, and they volley gun the crap out of people. And thanks to the volley gun having a 24-inch range, and it's not rapid fire, so it's always got those 4 shots, it means that your tank commanders can blow open the enemy vehicles, and then your Scion Jackals can Gatling them down, hotshot volley gun them down. Really, that's not a bad way of looking at this at all. And this would also allow you to start thinking about including the Warlord trait Skill Tracker, because you could take an extra Warlord trait via Progeny of Conflict, make one of your Scion guys a Skill Tracker, and so when your opponent, if your opponent seizes on you and you've deployed in a way where you want your hotshot volley gun guys to be shooting, and suddenly it's like, crap, he's going to clear those guys away, you can redeploy them into safety, out of line of sight, or you could redeploy them forward to the extent of your deployment zone, and maybe they're in range. It just gives you a bit more flexibility if you're thinking of that route. And and it allows you to get a bit more from your Regimental Doctrine. The drop route is kind of like the obvious route, but actually the sit back and Daka with hotshot volley guns kind of makes more sense from these guys. It allows you to take advantage of 3 out of 4 of the unique things of your regiment. You can do your doctrine with your volley guns, you can do your redeploy with your warlord trait, and you're much more likely to be over half range with your elusive hunters stratagem. So when you start thinking about this, imagine you've got 2 big squads of hotshot volley guns and a 5-man squad with hotshot volley guns. You're then looking at you can take cover on one of those squads when they're in cover, which means that they are 2-up save, and then you could use elusive hunters on them to make them 2-up save, -1 to hit. And then on another 10-man squad, you could be like Astropath, Night Shroud, Psychic Barrier, in cover. Guess what? You've got 2 10-man squad there, which are going to be happy blasting away at long range with 16 hotshot volley gun shots per squad, and they're going to be both of them on a 2-up save, both of them on a -1 to hit. Or you could go bonkers and stack all of those things on one 10-man squad. You could have Psychic Barrier, Take Cover, Night Shroud, Elusive Hunters, and you've got a Scion squad there, which is in cover, so 3-up, Take Cover, so 2-up, Psychic Barrier, so it's on a 1-up save, and then -2 to hit. So that would be pretty crazy. But I think that's stacking too much, and when you do that, your opponent is never going to target them. So there's 2 ways of looking at that. You can either drop a 10-man squad onto an objective in the midfield, super buff them, and the opponent's like, crap, I'm never going to get rid of them. Or you can use it to make your backfield objectives almost impossible for the opponent to get off you. So there's quite a lot of subtlety and flexibility that you can do with that stratagem. So they are actually an interesting regiment, and they do have some great tactical flexibility, and that's why I see them as a mid-tier, maybe lower mid-tier regiment. You can take advantage of their trait fairly easily, but the reason I don't put them, let's say, compare them to the Thatored Eagles, which I put as a solid mid-tier choice, or the Iotan Dragons, another solid mid-tier choice. The reason I put these guys as a lower tier choice, as lower mid, is simply because there are entire armies out there where your trait won't come into effect, your 2 battle shock. So that's really what I say puts them in the lower mid tier. However, if you lean into it with the elusive hunter stratagem, you can really start making one of these squads just ridiculous. I mean, another way you could look at it is you could have a 10-man squad with all those buffs on, and then also have them behind a squad of Bullgrins. And so because they're behind a squad of Bullgrins, you spend another CP on them to get its shield. I think it's called Shield of Flesh, which any unit that's behind the Bullgrins gets another -1 to hit. Suddenly, you've got a squad which has got +3 to its save, -3 to hit. Now, yeah, that's all in the shooting. That's all when it's being shot at. And yeah, it's one 10-man Scion squad. But and that is a little bit of overkill, but it's still something to have in your toolbox as a Scion Jackal. And it's something, like I said, if you really lean into it, you can really stack up the buffs on these guys. And I think that they are happier sitting back with volley guns than they are diving in with plasma guns. That's personally how I see it. You can get more out of them that way. What do you guys think? That's the best. That's how I would run them. I would still run them as a support detachment. I think they don't have enough that can be spread around to take a full 3 detachment all Scion Jackal army. I don't think there's enough there. But I think taking them as a good support detachment, yeah, solid mid tier. Out out of the 6 regiment traits, new regiment traits, I'd put these guys as a mid-tier one. They're not the same level as Lambs and Lions, but you can build around it. So I'd say they're probably around the same as the Cappic Eagles. You know, not terrible, but not great. So that's what I think, guys. What do you guys think about running them as a backfield force? I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. If you've got any comments or feedback, please put it down in the comment section, and of course I'll try and get back to you. I do read every single comment and I try and reply to as many as possible. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and of course I'll see you guys next time.